Thank you. All right. So, we break all the birds down into different series. And this is series 1 of the birds. Now, because of the unusual nature of this year, I don't know where we will go from here. But we definitely need to learn these 30. And it's basically our focus between now and Thanksgiving. I mean, over the next 3 weeks, I would like to talk about these birds, learn about them, go out and find them if possible, and review them, maybe even have a Kahoot. We'll have a quiz or two, but we're really focused on these 30 for right now. We may bump that up to 50. We might add 20 more. And I know as we go through them, you might be like, that bird looks like every other bird. It gets easier. The more you look at birds, the easier it gets. Now, there will be an app that we use, but it will not be the iBird Ultimate app that we've been using for nearly a decade. Mr. Kenny found a free one that is just as good, and we will work on downloading that later. Okay? And we'll practice using the app. So, the focus today will be on the birds in this first series, series 1. And some of you may know some of these. If you're a baseball or football fan, American football, you would know that this is the Northern Cardinal. So write that down, the Northern Cardinal. There are Blue Jay mascots for some sports teams, and the Blue Jay will be one of the birds we learned. But this is clearly not the Blue Jay.
Close enough though.
Cardinal. Just look up 2011 World Series champions.
Because it looks like a baseball card. That's why it's called a Cardinal.
Okay. So, the male
Is the red one.
is the red one. The female, and you'll see this a lot in the bird world, is the less colorful version or individual. So, male and female. Now, again, sometimes as we go through, we might come across other birds that are red. So, other features that you could note is the black mask that it's wearing here. And as we go through, I would like for you to always look at the beak of the bird. The cardinal has a shorter, pointy, thick beak. And what do you think you need a thicker, stubbier beak for? What do you think it eats with that beak? It cracks seeds and nuts with that short, thick beak. This is actually probably not a great bug-catching beak, but we'll look at some good bug-catching beaks. So this is the first bird, number 1, the Northern Cardinal.
Don't mess it up, guys.
Don't mess it up. Never miss it. Very good. All right. The most common bird you will see everywhere on campus is this second bird. What do we call it?
Pigeon.
It is not a pigeon.
Common housefly.
It is not a housefly.
Pterodactyl.
There is a book with this bird in the title. That,
Mockingbird.
yes. Mockingjay. That's not. Mockingjays are from.
The 19th.
No, the Hunger Games.
Oh.
It's not a real bird.
Wait, is it not a real bird?
No, they just combined Blue Jay and Mockingbird.
Well, they can use names.
I don't know what I'm saying.
Wait, are these our baseball cards?
So I don't know of any sports team that has a mockingbird as its mascot. But
But they're in Harry Potter.
your mockingbird is the mockingbird is very common on campus. Now this is the northern mockingbird,
Ah, northern.
but the directional parts of these names I usually don't worry about. So you can say just cardinal and you can just say mockingbird. Now, with the mockingbird, this is going to be it's a bigger bird compared to a lot of the birds we see. That's not a great diagnostic feature. But a few things you will see about it. It's got this really long set of tail feathers, and a lot of times they kind of raise them and lower them pretty often. The tail feathers aren't necessarily something you would use to identify a bird, but the mockingbird here does have the long tail feathers. And how is its beak different?
It's thin.
It's much longer, thinner, and maybe not more or less pointy, but it's longer and thinner than the cardinal. A long, thin beak isn't going to crack a seed very well, but these are good for catching bugs.
How do you spell beak? Is it
Wait,
beak?
why one fat? and one
Beak is B-E-A-K.
Ah,
Is the male that one?
Now, the males and females, I don't know how to discern between them, and this is not male and female. This is actually, with the cold weather coming up, a lot of times with the mockingbirds, they look kind of like longer, more slender birds, but when it's colder, a lot of birds you will see will kind of puff their feathers out like this, so its body shape may not always kind of look as slender if it's like a cold morning. And look, I have taken kids out in 20-degree weather, Fahrenheit, around around campus for zoology class. So, we will be bird watching on some very cold mornings from time to time. This is bird number 2, the northern mockingbird. Bird number 3.
House sparrow.
It is not the house. We will get to the house sparrow one day. This is the Carolina wren.
What?
Carolina
Red?
wren. W-R-E-N. Wren. W-R-E-N.
Interesting name.
It
Yes.
looks
Like
a
Kylo Ren?
Spells it.
It is spelled different.
But that's where it came from, right?
Nope. All right. So, with the Carolina wren, to me, and this is one of a couple things you could use to identify it, but to me, what is a marking that really stands out to you? The white eyebrow. That's right. So this white stripe along the head that looks like kind of a big eyebrow, we see Carolina wrens with some frequency on campus. You'll be able to identify one through the binoculars, and that's probably what you're looking for. They are a little smaller, but it's hard to gauge size from just these pictures. But when we get out in the field, you'll see size play more of a role. So the white eyebrow is what I would note about the Carolina wren.
What a nice looking beak.
This is a woodpecker. The next one.
Yes.
I wanna know about
we will
a
get to
movie.
we will get to that. What's that? Okay. So, number 4 here. This is a woodpecker, but specifically, it is the red-bellied woodpecker. Red-bellied woodpecker. Red-bellied woodpecker. Red-bellied is typically hyphenated.
I hyphenated
It
it.
has a red mohawk. I don't see a red belly though.
Great point. Usually on these birds, on this bird,
What are they,
the identifying feature is that there's a red stripe along the head, kind of a red mohawk. By the way, on some of them, it's from beak to the nape or back of the neck. On this one, there's kind of a break in the red stripe. And what do you think this is?
A female.
That's a female. That's right.
It's ugly.
So the male has this continuous red mohawk, whereas the female has kind of a half of a mohawk.
So they-
This would be what my mohawk looked like if I tried to grow
What
it,
do
just
they
in the
eat?
back of the head. They are going to use their beak to bore into wood to get insects out of trees. Now, I would say it's not just the red stripe on the head, but this kind of zebra black and white striping pattern that changes a little bit as you go back, and into the tail it changes too. That black and white back, though, is definitely a pretty diagnostic feature. This is the fourth one.
I hope that's number 8.
Do you count? Are you-
Okay, just so we don't take too much time on any one of these. Number 5. This is the Carolina, so we have Carolina again. The Carolina chickadee.
Whoa, that's a hard spelling.
Chickadee, as in CHICK, chick, ADEE, chickadee, all one word.
Chickadee.
Chickadee. Carolina chickadee.
What noise does it make?
The songs I am not terribly good at. Mr. Kenny can hear 100 different birds or can identify birds by their song. I mean, so many of them. It's unbelievable. I am working on that. He can also replicate a lot of their sounds
What?
himself, which is impressive.
Can you try it for this one?
Yes. Let's continue to move forward, please.
What's the one?
Okay, so what do you think an identifying feature here would be?
Black head.
Black.
Yes. You have kind of black, white, and black. A lot of times we'll talk about the white mustache.
Oreo head.
It's kind of this white mustache with kind of, that Oreo cookie pattern. You also will see kind of underneath the wing here, this is not something you will notice right away, but I do want to point out kind of a very secondary feature you might look at is this kind of rusty orange tint along the side. Sometimes we'll refer to this kind of brownish orange by a color known as rufus, which is kind of an old
That's my dad's name.
name. Some people have had names like that.
What's your mom's name?
Please, before I ask you to leave the class, Patrick Sheely and Quinn O'Hearn, just no more talking. Don't even ask me a question. Okay? We're recording. This is for other people to watch, and it just takes longer. Thanks. Okay, so I'm going to move on, since that was awkward, thanks to you two. All right, this is going to be bird number 6. This one, and this is why I warned them no more jokes, is called the tufted titmouse. The tufted titmouse. 2 words, tufted and then titmouse.
How do you spell it?
Tufted is Tufted. Titmouse is Titmouse. All right. These are pretty easy to identify out in the field once you review these birds a little bit. We'll see a number of them. There are a few things that give them away. This very kind of gray-white contrast. There are also these cute little guys. And they have this tiny little beak, but a big black eye. You will also notice under the wing is another example that we're talking about. We saw this a little bit on the chickadee. A rufous stripe or spot under the wing here. Yes, rufous. That is a term bird watchers seem to like to use to describe that kind of burnt orange that a number of different birds have. And probably another really good characteristic to know about this bird comes from its name, where it has a little tuft on the head. And when it gets really excited or angry, you'll see it kind of flare this like tuft of feather. And then sometimes the tuft is kind of laying down lower so it's not as obvious. All right, that's bird number 6, the tufted titmouse. Bird number 7. What is this?
Vulture.
This is a turkey vulture. Now, I keep talking about the size of these birds, which is not very helpful when you just have a photograph with no kind of surrounding reference objects. But these are really big birds. There is the black vulture, which is all black. The turkey vulture has this featherless head, which is a kind of a red color to it. Do you know why they don't have feathers on their head?
No.
Where are they constantly sticking their head? What are they eating?
Dead.
They eat dead carcasses, and they stick their head into these carcasses. And the fact that they don't have feathers means a lot of the kind of rot doesn't stick to their head. It's easier to kind of work your way around in a piece of roadkill if you don't have feathers on your head. Or hair on your head. If you're a
Are they
mammal.
born
So
with
what about the black
feathers on their
vultures?
Say again?
head? Are they born with feathers on their head?
I don't know that they're born with feathers and lose them. I'm pretty sure they always have a featherless head.
What about the black vultures?
The black vultures are the same way. They have this kind of featherless head, but the skin is actually black on the head. And there are a few other distinctions, some of the coloration underneath. One thing that you will see about them, like a lot of times they're flying in circles, usually looking for or approaching their food. And they have these long feather-like, or these long finger-like feathers at the end of their wings. But if you see a big black bird circling on campus, very likely going to be a vulture, and a pretty good chance it's a turkey vulture, but we'll have binoculars to, kind of make that.
Maybe around the soccer fields.
Yes, you see them all over campus. All right, so that's number 7, the turkey vulture. We may not finish all 30 today, but we can go through the rest of them some other day. Okay, this is not a vulture. It is a hawk. And specifically this one, you can see here, is a red-tailed hawk. This is the red-tailed hawk. The red-tailed hawk. So that's the undershot. You can see the red tail here as well in this picture. The males are bigger than the females, but that's not something, if that ever comes up on campus when we're walking around looking and we see a male and a female and they're close enough together to make that determination, that would be very impressive. So I don't expect you, like if you just see one flying in the air, to identify male or female. We're not going to go that in depth. But sometimes on Cave Spring Road, there are some power poles, and just the very end of last week, I turned out campus towards town, and on one of the first power poles, there was a hawk, and I could see this kind of vest that it's wearing. There's kind of this coloration kind of along the lower breast of the bird here. Mr. Kinney refers to this as the cummerbund. Like on a tuxedo, you have kind of the cummerbund portion to some tuxedos. So it has kind of a cummerbund that it's wearing. We will look at other types of hawks, and when we actually get to a different type of hawk, we can talk about the differences, but I don't want to spend too much time on it. But red tail, which you can even somewhat tell from the bottom of the tail as well. All right, so that is number 8. Number 9 is the mourning dove. But
Morning what?
mourning dove. But mourning is like sadness, not as in the AM versus the PM. So it's mourning as in mourning. Mourning.
Never heard about word in my life.
To be mournful, or somebody's in mourning.
Is that after someone's died?
Yeah, like after a tragedy or some sad event. Yeah, that's good. I'm glad you were learning some vocab too. So these are all over campus. And it's a mourning dove. A lot of these doves will have kind of a more plump body. They're a pretty big bird. I mean, they're not vulture sized, but they're much larger than your cardinal or your like a titmouse or a chickadee. And sometimes you'll hear them cooing. They'll kind of have this like, ooh, ooh. And it's like they're mourning, or it sounds sad. And they also have this, they're usually on the ground. They're like kind of a ground feeding bird. And so there are a lot of places around campus where, if no one has walked by in a while and you walk by and scare them, a group of 5 to 10 of them will start flapping and fly up off the ground. And there's kind of this like twittering that happens when they're scared and flying. Those are all mourning doves. We will see a ton of these on campus. And that's number 9, the mourning dove.
Did you say they have a blue beak?
There are, and I'm glad you pointed that out. There's a lot of features on a lot of these birds. Like you have kind of these black spots. You have the blue highlight, and even on this picture, I don't know how common this is on these birds in general, but there's kind of a bluish tint in the beak, a little bit of bluish tint under the wing here. Those are pretty minor. I'm going to be honest with you. In about 2 weeks after we've gone out a few times and seen a few of these, there won't be any color patterns that you look for when you identify them. You're going to hear them fly away and just know it's a mourning dove. We should be able to scare up a few as we walk around. Okay, number 10 is what? This is the blue jay. The blue jay, which I think is 2 words, just blue and then a second word of jay, but if you made it one word, it wouldn't hurt my feelings. They have a very distinct kind of cawing sound. It's not a cawing like a crow, but it's more of a little bit more of a shriek version of that. Well, I hear them all the time. I'll point out their call. This is one that you'll be able to identify it by the sounds it makes. Pretty big bird. There is one other bird that we'll see that's blue, but the eastern bluebird, which we'll talk about later, is much smaller. And there's a lot of like blue with black markings. And they actually have a little bit of a tendency to mimic. So sometimes they'll make this kind of hawk-like sound, is my understanding. I actually can't tell the difference. But Mr. Kenny, again, talking about his expert bird ear, he can actually kind of tell when it's a blue jay trying to act like a hawk versus an actual hawk call. So maybe we can figure that out. But very distinct bird. Now look, that's the first 10 of the 30. And that took a lot longer than I anticipated. And I want you to have time to wrap up the stuff for the fish that we kind of didn't get to do because we missed school on Thursday and Friday. So we're going to stop the video there and talk about birds 11 through whatever next class. And then we'll probably next class get the binoculars out once we get to a certain point and go for a bird walk. So Hannah, if you could stop the video for me. Blue jay number 10.